All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to call the Richmond City Council meeting of Monday, July 24th, 2023 to order. I have a motion on the minutes. Moved and seconded. Any discussion, errors, or omissions? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Any agenda additions or deletions, Madam Clerk?
No, Your Worship.
All right. So we'll start off the proceedings with a presentation by Sarah Ross, the Vice President of Transportation Policy and Planning for TransLink, to talk about the 480. Ms. Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Brody and Council, for inviting TransLink to speak with you this evening. Again, I'm Sarah Ross, VP of Planning for TransLink, and I'm here in response to your request for more information on our decision to retire the Route 480. Thank you for loading up my slides. If we can move to the next slide. Thank you. Route 480 was a peak-only weekday express service that connected Bridgeport Station in Richmond to UBC. About 70% of the 480 customers traveled between Richmond all the way to UBC. Today, customers can now take the Canada Line from Bridgeport and transfer to routes R4, which runs on the 41st corridor, or the number 49, which runs on the 49th corridor. Both the Canada Line and the R4 Rapid Bus come every 3 to 4 minutes, which is the highest level of frequency our system has. Next slide, please. A little bit of a background on this. So before January 2020, the route was actually an all-day, Monday to Friday service. It did have about 4,000 daily boardings. In January of 2020, we launched the Rapid Bus. That's the R4 on 41st. And the 480 became a peak-only weekday service running in mornings and evenings. And the ridership went to 650. And at this time, there was limited peak capacity on the Canada Line, and so the 480 provided some extra capacity on that route. Now, when COVID hit, and classes, UBCs, really shut down or moved classes online, the 480 was suspended along with 18 other routes via an emergency service plan as ridership plummeted, TransLink's revenues plummeted. We were in very dire situation, and also the needs for transit in the region were dramatically different. As we started to emerge from the pandemic in the spring, we started to look at where the needs were most, and we saw ridership particularly the most robust on highest, particularly on routes serving essential workers, and so we did some service reallocations. We also undertook technical analysis to look at all of the suspended routes to see, given the pressures on our system, given our limited resources, what is the best use of those resources and what are the alternatives. Part of that technical analysis showed that there was sufficient capacity on the Canada Line and the services on the Rapid Bus due to lower peak ridership. We also had additional trains that had arrived just prior to and during COVID that were implemented on the Canada Line. And so we now can accommodate the former 480 customers on those routes with comparable travel times. Next slide, please. So I think it's, I want to provide the context that we are facing significant pressures across our system. 50,000 people, more people coming to this region every year. There are needs for transit services and bus services across the region, but due to ongoing financial challenges, while we're funded to deliver our current services, we are not in a position to expand service at all. So we really have to work with what we've got and make the best use of our existing resources. And our focus is on providing as much frequent and reliable service to the most amount of people, and we're doing this by doing some reallocation of service where the service that remains stays high frequency and meets the capacity needs. And also we've been doing some reallocations, particularly to south of the Fraser, where the total transit ridership now well exceeds what it was pre-COVID by 115% actually, or 15% higher than it was in 2019. And we know that, many customers prefer a one-seat ride rather than having to make a transfer in their journey. We certainly acknowledge that. However, transfers help allocate resources most efficiently to provide more service to more people across the region. Next slide, please. We're confident that the services connecting from Richmond to UBC provide similar travel times or even better, and operate more frequently and are more flexible than the 480. And I have a table here where you can see we've done the travel time comparisons. So they're comparable, if not faster. Again, and really convenient, as again the Canada Line and the R4 services are both running every 3 to 4 minutes. So if you go to the next slide, and we've specifically looked at that connection, and we know that individual customer experiences vary, and that from time to time there is crowding or overcrowding, and someone may maybe have to wait a bus or a train, but because it's very frequent, we see that one not happening that often, and it's a fairly minimal wait time. And our analysis is that there is not chronic overcrowding on either of those routes. And in fact, coming September, we'll be increasing service on the 49 and the R4. We look very closely at the Canada Line overcrowding, and we'll be looking at whether we need to do some shifting to increase trips in the peak if we start to see overcrowding there. So I'll just close by noting that our focus is on providing frequent and reliable service. We have an Access for Everyone plan. We calls for more than doubling of bus service in the region to meet the many, many demands of this growing region and help make Metro Vancouver more affordable and help advance our commitments to climate action. And that's why we need the Access for Everyone plan. Thank you very much for your time, Mayor Brody, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Your analysis where you talk about the timing, that does assume that the connections are all made, right? That there's no pass-ups, no other issues like that, right?
Yeah, that's looking at what the typical time would take.
Isn't the request being made here in the scheme of TransLink, isn't it pretty minor? I mean, there's a significant group in Richmond that values that service. They had the service, lost it. I mean, wouldn't it be just a minor stroke of the pen or just a rounding error to give it back? For peak times anyway?
I would say it's, and we are a big system. Every one route at peak times is a fairly small percentage, but we also have demands across the system, and those hours, as I said, would have to come from somewhere. We would have to cut something else. And I think in this situation, we have a very, amongst our most excellent alternative in place with a very frequent train service transferring to our highest level of bus service that provides that connection.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just go back to what the mayor's first question was about. And it was one of your slides there where it showed the comparable travel times. So what jumps out to me is that the 480 has between 37 to 47 minute travel time. So those people get on the bus, they take their seat, that's their spread of time. There's no transfers that would be a factor in there. It's simply the bus that they're on. All these other times, there's potential for delay. You get to your transfer, which you stated is a cost-saving measure of TransLink. It helps with the financial crisis by having more transfers, but it sure doesn't help people who are trying to plan their schedule, trying to get to class, trying to get to work. Could you clarify all the other estimated travel times? Are they including missing the first bus that comes, or like how does this work?
Through the chair, if I may, we acknowledge that people prefer to have a one-seat ride. Even on the 480, there's also certainly risks of delay. In fact, there are probably higher risks of delay compared to the Canada Line, which is traveling, separated from traffic, as well as the services that run highly frequently you typically have less time to wait than on a service that's running less frequently. So we didn't account in for, the time you might have to wait if you just missed the 480 and you needed to wait an extra 10 or 15 minutes for that as well. So there's different factors that happen in comparing travel times. So it is an estimate, based on schedules. We know that from time to time things take longer. There are delays. That happens on all aspects of the system.
Okay, thanks. I'll follow up on just comment on that. I don't think that's fair to compare when you're factoring in multiple different factors as opposed to just the bus having a delay. What's your response to the petition that you received? We haven't seen any of your response. Could you clarify? Have you received the petition from James?
Yes, we're aware that there is a petition. I'll have to follow up if we've provided a formal response. We certainly will if we have not. I appreciate that there is interest in having that direct connection. TransLink receives petitions from time to time in different parts of the region and for interest in service. And as I said, we're limited in our ability, and I think in our assessment in this case is there's a very high quality alternative to the 480.
Okay, thanks. One last question, if I may, through the mayor. So I've some other stats I've read is before your timeline here of 2020, there were 12 such articulated buses and 25 drivers assigned to this 480 route. Many other major cities are going back to their pre-pandemic levels, and it seems like here we're struggling to get back and putting the blame on financial challenges and using our ridership as the playing chip. And many students that I talk to who are grade 12 and choosing university are hesitant to choose a university that's a bus ride away because these delays make it inconvenient and not possible to keep up with their other aspects of their lives. So I don't think you need to necessarily just be reversing what you say is a permanent retiring of the 480 line for us or to the signers of the petition, but all of the future Richmond residents that are planning to use that institution to further their knowledge and create a life for themselves. I think it's a real disservice that we don't have an ability for to communicate. We're just told that this is permanently retired, and I don't accept that. If we could somehow vote on this, I definitely wouldn't support it. Thanks.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thanks, and through the chair, well, thank you for being here and taking the time to come. I'm curious, I think you mentioned 18 other routes were retired, was the term. So out of those 18 routes, were they geographically dispersed or were they all connected to, I think, kind of what you termed as like an efficient alternate form like Expo Line, Millennium Line, Canada Line? Were the 18 routes all around those areas?
The 18 routes reference routes that had been suspended, and we did a review, and so there's not 18 routes that remain suspended. Where we have made changes to our service because of changes that emerged through COVID and travel patterns, it has been where there's been an equally as good alternative. So not all of the another route that is retired is one that there are alternate bus services that provide that that connection.
Okay, alternate routes, I guess, right? Just a couple other questions, quick ones. So out of the routes that were retired, were there any new routes created elsewhere, or were the resources from like the 480 just put into existing routes?
The resources from the 480 were put into existing services to increase frequency, particularly on routes in the south of the Fraser region, where we had that area of the region is growing strongly. A lot of very high retention of ridership throughout the pandemic, much higher percentage of people who, or let me put it this way, lower percentage of people who are working from home, higher rates of service workers. So a lot of routes in that area were experiencing overcrowding and needed extra services. And so we were able to look at where, because of changes during COVID, and there'd been some reduction in demand on some routes, we were able to provide some services on areas that had a lot of demand while still ensuring those other areas still had very high quality service.
Sure, and just one last quick comment. I mean, one of the concerns I have with this, among many, is just that, you know, making assessments just pre-COVID and then during COVID and not giving it a chance to recover from COVID is almost, you know, an impossible request for the ridership to demonstrate that it's, you know, it needs that route, because COVID obviously was, you know, exceptional times for everybody, including for TransLink. So that's one of my concerns, is just making this kind of decision basically in the shadow of COVID without actually giving the route time to recover, like many other businesses have. So, but thank you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. I think Councillor Hobbs just hit the nail on the head. That's exactly. You know, every business that was affected by COVID had a chance to bounce back. And I think that changing this right after COVID and during COVID was absolutely the wrong way to go. But I'm a businesswoman. I had my business for 45 years. When you've got 4,000 boardings and 70% of them are going to UBC prior, and you said in 2020, and then after the change, it was 650. I mean, where is the business model for that? And then if we could just bring up the map, I believe that Surrey and Delta were also connected to that 480, right? Like from what I could see from the map, there was, the bus would run from, say, the tunnel and then up into the Richmond Center. Yeah, this one here on the left-hand side. So did it not also bring people in from like Delta that potentially, and Surrey that maybe took the SkyTrain and then hopped on? I mean,
Thank you for your question. So just to reference the first part of your comment about the ridership, our experience is a significant majority of the ridership that had been using the 480 chose to shift to the Canada Line and the new rapid bus, that limited stop fast service running on 41st Avenue. This route, the 480, started at Bridgeport and went to UBC. So people who are traveling to UBC from Delta or from some areas of Surrey do have buses that come into Bridgeport. It's possible some of them had been transferring to the 480. More likely they were transferring onto the Canada Line.
yeah, well, we heard loud and clear from, you know, the like hundreds, thousands of signatures from students, and our job is to lobby for the people of Richmond. But I think that cutting the 480, canceling it, retiring it, didn't just affect Richmondites, it affected people south of the Fraser as well. And I think we should have a vote to ask TransLink to reinstate the 480, given the very strong desire to have that brought back again. And I think that, you know, the thing to do is to rejig it. I just took a tour of the TransLink facility, and it's amazingly efficient, you know, and I believe if we dug a little deeper, that TransLink could find a way to, at least during peak times, put that back.
Councillor Howe.
Yes, well, I understand that you mentioned about technical analysis, and you base on your change on this technical analysis, and also you talk about average time. So I always have a problem with that kind of analysis because it's so technical. So my question is, before you make that kind of permanent decision, did TransLink consult with the user, the students, UB students, or city staff that, with the transportation department? So did you talk to them and consult with them before you make the permanent decision?
We did undertake consultation with city staff. We did not undertake public consultation with students at UBC in advance of making this decision.
Okay, then my follow-up question is, after you make that change, did you do any riders survey to collect the experience of the riders? Again, your technical analysis and life experience could be very different.
I thank you for your comment, and through the chair, I very much want to acknowledge that technical analysis is one aspect, but lived experience is also important. We certainly are always making decisions based on understanding, looking at the input that we receive from customers and the public through our variety of channels. And I want to acknowledge that we know that from time to time people will have a much longer trip or a delayed trip or a crowded trip because something might there might be a delay in the system. For example, that occurs. It could be due to something on our side. It could be due to a situation on the road that's unavoidable. And that's difficult for customers, and it's important to take that into consideration. We do monitor very closely how overall these services are performing, looking at both data on the ridership data as well as our other inputs of customer experience.
Well, I think the short answer is that you haven't done any rider survey for their life experience. But that's okay. So my question is, will you take the petition as riders' feedback?
Yes, we will.
Okay. And what will it take for TransLink to reconsider bringing back Route
We'll get to that.
180?
We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for coming and telling us what's going on. You talked about average times and everything else. It seems to me that since the Compass cards come in, you can probably tell, Compass card 369 used to go on the 480 and carry on. And maybe you don't look at it, do such a deep dive, but you can probably pull the kind of data and know that, card 480 used to go on the 480 at such and such a time every single day going out to UBC. Then they had to change and maybe they get on it. This new system, do they have to leave earlier to then make those times because they're worried about this? Or did you just send some live bodies of your own live bodies to go and try these routes and to see, if they're actually making those connections?
Thank you very much. Through the chair, we do not, all of our analysis on custom using our Compass cards doesn't look at individual cards. So we don't go and try to pull out which Compass cards used to use the 480 and which ones are looking at that, doing that now, because we generalize for that, so we're not looking at specific Compass cards. And there's also, there's change over time. So we certainly do look at, in terms of what the travel time is. We can look at the schedules that get made. We can look at what the actual expected travel time as well is. I mean, even tools like Google Maps are useful to look at, like, okay, our schedules might say one thing, but what does Google say it's going to normally take based on people's traveling? So there's a few different sources that we can look at to estimate that. And I mean, it's like all transportation travel in the region, especially in a very congested region that's very high variability. Often a trip that might take you 20 minutes to drive on a good day could take 50 minutes on a bad day, or, and maybe you should normally have to budget 30 minutes. So, that's no different on the transit system too. Although for this portion, the portion of which is on the train, separated from traffic, and is also the R4 on 41st is a corridor with a higher level of transit priority measures in terms of dedicated bus lanes. So actually, it's amongst the most reliable parts of our system.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate the comment. It takes me back to my student days from 7th McDonald to dedicated straight out to UBC. Just a couple, following up on a couple of questions that are brought. The sheet that we got here, you did your analysis starting January 2020, and now it's April 2023. And before it was really a dedicated educational bus, it seemed to be. You know, they got on, sat down with their books, and away they went, and they knew at the end of the line they were going to get off where it is at the gymnasium out there or whatever, and they would stop. And then they were forced to make a change and go on R4 to 41st, which they may or may not have hit and got on that. But have you done any survey on the current students today? The current data? I mean, you got a petition, but the data was based, appears to me, on 3 years ago. I don't know what the situation is today and what UBC is doing, but I agree with some of my colleagues about students. We're talking about students 18 to whatever and going to an educational institute. So I'm just wondering how convenient it is today. Or are they driving their cars out there? Because Marine Drive is packed. At any Southwest Marine Drive is packed at any time of the day, both ways.
The information that I'm providing is based on recent analysis. So I did reference January 2020, just in terms of the timeline, but the analysis on the travel time is based on travel time assessment from this past spring.
But my question is numbers.
Oh, in terms of the...
They're not, these are educational students as opposed to members of the general public jumping on Brig House, getting down there and heading on to Kitsilano or wherever.
I do not have, although I perhaps could follow up, I don't have the numbers on what the ridership is between Richmond and UBC overall. The ridership numbers I quoted were from the 650 were the ridership on the 480 per day. So it's a per day number. So that's from sort of January, February 2020, just before COVID hit.
I'm not questioning what you've done. Obviously, you've done a good analysis, but that was done in January 2020, and that was 3 years ago. And it'd be very interesting to see what the data today reveals. And I would maintain it will probably augment support for reinstating the 480. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll excuse you. I'm going to suggest that we have a motion. Excuse me, whatever that was. I'm going to suggest we have a motion directing the mayor to write a letter to the TransLink CEO and the board chair strongly suggesting that the TransLink board reinstate the 480 service from Richmond to UBC.
I would so move. Second.
Okay, so that's moved in second. I think we've been through it all. I'm simply going to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the delegations. May I have a motion to resolve in the committee of the whole to hear delegations on items on the agenda?
So moved.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. Now, first of all, pre-registered are some delegates. Wendy Zhang, Howard Wen, AJ Antonio, and Joe Vu. Are they here tonight? Please come forward. Introduce yourselves, please. And between you, you know that you've got 5 minutes. We've got a long agenda, so we're going to keep you to the 5 minutes. My notes say you're delegating on number 11, which is the youth strategy. All right, go ahead.
Hello, Your Worship and councilors. My name is AJ Antonio, and beside me are my fellow group members, Joe Vu, Howard Wen, and Wendy Zhang. On the basis of this meeting's agenda, we would like to propose an extension to the youth strategy. A Richmond Youth Committee that would synchronize with the strategy's values of youth voices and engagement upon the decisions of Richmond.
So we have already proposed the Richmond Youth Committee during the Youth Civic Engagement Program. Thus, we'd like to formally propose it once more in hopes of it being implemented. As we realize there simply isn't a permanent medium for youth to share their voices without having to delegate, which also brings a certain amount of pressure. Thus, utilizing the youth strategy, we hope to create a permanent representative group for youth to comfortably and openly interact with the council while also placing youth into roles of leadership.
Seeing the proposed plans of the youth strategy, we would like to say that we really appreciate the consideration of the Council for Youth Voice. Our proposal of the committee designed for youth aligns with strategic priority 2, where youth are prioritized in being heard, valued, and engaged as members of the community, and that their opinions and perspectives inform plans, programs, and services that are important to them and impact their lives.
Next slide, please. There are 3 main themes and actions we want to highlight in the strategic priority 2, which is voice. Section 2.1 is to increase opportunities for youth to provide meaningful inputs into city-related matters that impact them, including youth from equity-deserving groups. Section 2.2 is to promote and seek youth engagements in programs, services, and facility development, and on topics in the community that impact youth. Section 2.6 is to include youth in the development of implementation plans and promotion of the youth strategy. Next slide, please. And with the above said, we would like to propose the idea of the youth committee, one that would be an addition to the youth strategy.
Understanding these 3 sections above, we come up with 3 main goals for the youth committee. First, to provide youth in Richmond the platform to voice their opinions and ideas. Second, to engage youth in Richmond through events, programs, and initiatives in collaboration with the community partners. And third, to create opportunities for youth to undertake leadership roles in the city. These goals relate to the youth strategy by providing youth an opportunity to embrace their voice on issues regarding youth and programs or services that are responsive to their needs. Therefore, youth can grow through engaging in the decision-making process and be able to build a strong and healthy community in the future.
These goals can be broken down into 3 potential operations: electorate, advisory, and events. We think that the greatest value of the youth committee would be in advisory, which is to provide information and consultation to the city council with problems regarding youth. Youth may be more aware of their own issues and can find better fit for their solutions. An electorate operation, similar to the Richmond City Youth Council, there would be a body that would go to similar processes to vote on different topics. This also goes hand in hand with events, where by utilizing youth committee members and the resources of the city, we can create a positive image for the city and build youth engagement within.
Next slide, please. Some examples of established youth councils in Greater Vancouver and Canada are as follows: Prime Minister's Youth Council, Vancouver Citywide Council, and many more, as we see on the slide. These examples have youth councils or committees where leadership and advocacy are commonplace, which also allow the city to gain new perspectives on issues impacting youth. Additionally, we'd like to note that there exist many advisory committees in the Richmond City Council for other groups, such as the Seniors Advisory Committee. Thus, why not one for youth? Since youth are also an integral part of Richmond, we believe that we should also have a committee dedicated to serving the youth.
Next slide, please. To sum it up, we hope that a Richmond Youth Committee can be established, like many other committees listing our examples. Synchronizing with the youth strategy, this committee can also provide youth with the opportunity to positively interact and impact the city, accommodate a medium for them to speak their voices, and consider the issues that youth may face in Richmond. Thank you all for listening to our proposal, and to the city staff, Chris Duggan, for helping us bring this proposal into fruition. Please, we would like you to ask us a question now. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'm gonna suggest, because it's very difficult to put this together with the youth strategy that we've got on the agenda, I'm gonna suggest that we would have a motion to refer this to staff for their comments and to bring it back to committee, their comments and options.
I would so move.
Okay, so that's moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? I see some questions. Is this on the referral?
No, it's not,
Okay.
it's of the delegation.
Okay, so let's just have that referral motion. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Does that answer you, Councillor Wolf?
Thank you. Just a few short ones. I guess first off, how do you feel about the decision that was just made? Okay. Okay, thank you. Second one is, you mentioned that you worked with staff since being part of the Youth Civic Engagement Committee. Have you had other connections with the city, like since your involvement in that? Have you felt in those roles of engagement, event coordination or advisory, do you feel like you've had a satisfactory amount or not, and that's why you're here asking for more?
For the recent times, I volunteer with the city in the Green Ambassadors, and we do like green stuff, like separate trash in the bin in events like Stevenson Salmin Stevenson Festival or Maritime Festival. And I think that I represent Eco Team, like a group in my school, to promote green energy, green stuff presentation to the students, and it's just one part of this. It's just a small part of the whole idea we are bringing today, like the youth council, like the voices, and also the ideas regarding many issues and other issues, like the planning,
All right.
the tree at the school, and
Yeah,
more.
thank you, and that satisfies what I asked, and really I do feel that your youth play that role in events, but there's so much more potential to come, and I really hope that you're part of that. Thanks.
Councillor McNulty, you've got a question?
Yeah, I do. Now, I echo the same comments that Councillor Wolf had on it. And I guess my question is, you're the youth group. How are you going to, and I agree with the referral, how are you going to bring everybody else along? You say you represent somebody in your school. All right, you got 1,000 students there. I only see 4 in front of me. What are the 996 other students going to, are they represented through you? And are they going to have the same opportunity to be involved as you? Have you thought of that? You have certain interests. I support you 100%. As an educator for 40 years, I believe in everything you're doing. However, you're the achievers. You're the leaders. Well, I just want to play street hockey. I just want to shoot my puck out in the
Let's
back.
get an
So,
answer.
how are
Do
you
you have
going
any
to
reply
represent
to
them?
this?
So, yeah, we do take your concern very seriously, and yes, we do recognize that it's not only us that want to be in this position where we want to be, engage with the council, but we also want to know that not everybody wants to do this. So, most likely, we'll have this committee to have either appointments, either applications, either a combination of both. But we just want to get those who are interested, who are qualified, and those who are passionate about this. And yes, we, of course, do know that there's a lot of youth in this regard that want something like this, and opportunity like this to participate in.
Councillor
Great
Day.
answer.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for coming forward. I think it's a great idea having a youth committee. I didn't know that the other cities already had one, so that was very valuable information. So in addition to the youth committee, I wonder if it wouldn't be worthwhile, you've made a comparison between the seniors advisory committee and the youth committee, and that is a good comparison. And I wonder if visiting some of the other committees as guests, even as observers, may be very helpful in helping you gain knowledge of how these committees work, because many of them have been around for decades, and they can be benefit to you. Is that something you would consider doing?
Yes, of course, because we realized that like as with the other committees, we weren't like aware that, because we wanted to share our voices, and we only recently learned that there weren't actually any opportunities for us to like do so without having to delegate. Thus, we think that it would be a really good idea, as Councillor Day said, to visit the other committees should it be set up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you. Quick question. Thank you for coming out and speaking. How old are you, if I may ask? Because I know that there's kind of a mechanism through the Table 38. There's representatives from all the different schools that come together and sort of sit on a board through the school program, but perhaps you've aged out of that, and so then you're looking for a different mechanism to be engaged, or maybe you are still in the high school system.
Are you talking about high school or post-secondary?
We are talking about both. So that would be, as the people who sit on this table right now, 3 of us are still in high school going into grade 12, and 1 of us has graduated.
All right, so you're talking about both.
Yeah, so both, post-secondary and secondary.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Councillor.
All right, are there other parties wishing to delegate on items on the agenda this evening? Anyone else? Anyone else? May I have a motion to rise and report?
So moved.
All those in favor, opposed, carried. That brings us to the consent agenda. We have the receipt of the committee minutes, the land use applications which go to public hearing if they pass on September 5th, 8520 40 60 Railway Avenue, rezoning from single detached RS1E zone to the low-rise rental apartment ZLR47. Then we have 4831 Stevenson Highway, rezoning from RS1E to the low-rise rental apartments ZLR48. We have the response to Metro Vancouver's referral for land use designation amendment to the Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy proposed by the Township of Langley for properties on Fraser Highway. A housing agreement, bylaw 10443, in relation to 9300 and 9320 Canby Road. We have a couple strategies, the City of Richmond Youth Strategy 2022 to 2032, and the Social Development Strategy, a progress report for 2022, an extension of a contract for the supply of hydrovac services. There's an award of a contract for provision of traffic control services, potential enhancements to the Railway Greenway, Richmond Sports Facility Needs Assessment, the 2023 update, and the off-leash dog park in London Stevenson Park. May I have a motion to adopt those by general consent? So that's moved and seconded. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'll be speaking to about half the items, I think. Very briefly, though, and I have questions for transportation and sports at the end for items 15 and 16. First off, item number 7, that's the Railway Avenue 58 rental units for seniors. I really applaud the developer here where they're actually hoping to achieve the step code 4. We don't hear enough of that. They also have the innovative strategy of putting outdoor amenity space on top of their enclosed parking, which actually exceeds the required outdoor amenity space, so that's great. We won't lose any bylaw trees, as there are none on the site to go, but we do lose a hedge and rhodo shrub. Item number 8, that's the Steveston Highway rezoning, where we'll see 25 affordable housing rental units. The project here will save 42 trees that are within that site. And we will unfortunately lose a couple trees, 4 trees, sorry, and a hedge, and maybe get step code 4 out of that project as well. I'm just going to skip along here then. The youth strategy that we just had a delegation on, that was great. I do hope that that's a living document, as we've seen previous strategies can. Like item number 12, we're getting progress reports or updates, and there's opportunity for things to be infused into them at a later date. But I really think this youth council is something that could happen very soon. The extension of contracts are both supportive from my end. The hydrovac goes to McRae. McRae is situated out in Hamilton within Richmond area, so that's a good local company to add on here. I'll just get to my I'll get to one other item before I get to the ones with questions. Item number 17, that's the off-leash dog park in London Steveston Park. We heard at length from a delegate at Parks and Rec on that item. Many of us coming to that committee were unsure what that item was going to be because it was simply concern about the off-leash dog park. And it ended up being quite an extensive concern that we heard mainly through the lack of consultation with the direct neighbors to that area. I know myself going by along Williams, looking at the Steveston London school field, seeing quite a major project going on there. So what we decided at committee, which is before us now today, is that we will pause the dog park component of that work, but we will go ahead with the necessary infrastructure improvements for drainage and trail projects that were intended to be done. And so those will be completed, and then we'll see where the dog park component goes after the extensive consultation goes forward. Moving on to my last two items that each have a question. So I have one for transportation staff to answer. So at Parks and Rec, I was going to ask these questions, but it wasn't suitable because it's not a transportation item. But here before us tonight, we have transportation staff to answer. So one thing before I get to the question is we did get confirmation that for that project, we will ensure that there's door-to-door invitation for all residents that are adjacent to the railway greenway. So they are communicated with what the project will entail, the lighting component to this discussion, and they get their feedback and their participation in events. So my questions lead from a letter that Mayor and Council received about two potential transportation options for railway and how they might be part of, if we're lighting it up, or putting in infrastructure for that, maybe we could put infrastructure in at the intersections to do some other things. So if I could just get a comment from staff on potential having no more right-hand turn lanes.
No, we're not talking about that in number 15. If you want to raise that kind of an issue, could be a great issue, please bring it up at Public Works.
Okay, well, I read this as potential enhancements to the railway greenway, and under that title, enhancements for the pedestrians using the greenway, that would clearly fit in, but I'm not able to answer my question, so sorry for taking your time up. Staff, maybe I'll be allowed my next question here. Number 16, it's this Richmond Sports Facility Needs Assessment update, and that was brought to Parks and Rec Culture Committee, and our recommendation, which I supported, was to have the priority list of 6 projects sent to back over the next time, and then we would start to get independent reports from staff. And we would start to get independent reports from staff on those projects. We just received, Mayor and Council just received a memo on July 21st that gave a list of all the sport organizations that were informed about this facility needs assessment. And they were all to be informed, given a survey, and we found out like 51 of them or something replied to the survey. So I looked through that long list, and I found out that all the community associations did not complete the survey. So none of those keepers of all the programming and make decisions on what happens at our facilities, community centers, they weren't even, their ideas didn't even come into this. And I asked a couple of the members of committees, did they even hear about this? And they said no. So I would just like staff to find out about that. Thanks.
What's the status of the consultation? Who did you hear from? Who didn't you hear from?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, the survey was sent to 89 different groups within the community that are regular users of the sports facilities. That did include the community center associations. Not all of the community centers responded to that survey, as you have noted. Certainly, the public survey was only one aspect of the consultation with the public. There were also stakeholder engagement sessions that were completed with the with the facilities task force to understand the results of that survey, understand the information that had been brought forward from Sports Council in 2018 and to be able to identify needs for sports facilities within the community.
Thanks. Just to follow up that, then you mentioned that some of them did not reply, but as I see on this checklist, none of the community associations replied. So, yeah, it's not in our package. It's the memo we received on the 21st. So I'm just concerned maybe we could add an amendment where we seek out input from those over the month, as opposed to referring this back and delaying it. I think it'd be better to get the ball rolling on some of these projects. But I guess the question then, would you be able to reach out to the community associations, which I know do meet throughout the summer, and see if you can get any commonality from their direct feedback, and maybe maybe there'll be a 7th priority that wasn't hit, they were missed.
I'm going to partially answer that question. We are being asked to endorse the list tonight. If there's some issues with the process or something, then it should be referred back. We should get more input or whatever needs to be addressed. But once it's endorsed, it's endorsed.
And through your worship to Councillor Wolf, certainly we could reach out to the community center associations for feedback on the existing list of priorities. Further, it's important to note that staff will continue to monitor the sport landscape within Richmond and work with organizations that provide sport throughout the community, sport organizations, the community center associations, and others that are involved in the provision of sport. And should those organizations identify emerging needs, changes in sport participation, other opportunities that staff should look at, staff would certainly assess each of those opportunities that come forward in light of the criteria that were used to assess sport priorities, and if warranted, would certainly bring those forward to council for consideration.
Great, I appreciate that. I won't ask for a referral back until the rest of council comments on the consent agenda, but could you come back to me, Mayor, if at the end there?
Well, yeah, we'll see at the end. I just want to comment to staff, with respect, this is a prioritized list asking for endorsement. So if there's a flaw in the process getting us to endorsement, we need to address it. I'm not advocating for it. It's okay with me. But we need to address it and not say that if the sports needs change, that somehow we can have a change at that point. All right, thank you very much. We'll go to Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Worship. Sorry, please don't come back.
Oh.
I will be supporting everything on tonight's consent agenda, and I actually want to thank the Richmond Sports Council for their work on the sports facility and infrastructure prioritized list. I know item 3 would have come in handy this week at the Little League Nationals that's going on this week here. It's welcoming teams from all over Canada, and I know I went out and watched some of the action, and there was a lot of fun going on out there. But certainly having a synthetic turf infield, say right here over at Brighouse, would be handy for a lot of kids being able to play ball through longer periods of the season. So in respect to this sport facility infrastructure, it occurs to me that the community centers sort of have their own stream that they go through to determine what it is they need and what they're getting and how they're getting it. For example, Steveston's getting a whole new community center, so that's good for them. And so maybe them weighing on top of this is a bit awkward. I know Hamilton, we're looking at improving their community center in the near future as well, and so it's sort of on a different stream. And I noticed also that aquatics and arenas advisory committees didn't weigh in on this because, once again, I think they're on slightly different streams to get the work done, information through to council and what we're doing here, right?
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, certainly the community center associations have avenues through staff to be able to provide feedback about needs of community centers within the facility. The sports users that you refer to in regards to arenas and aquatics, there were a number of responses that were actually received from aquatic user groups and arena user groups throughout this process.
Okay, but some of those do come to us straight through the Aquatic Advisory Board and not through this process in the final itemized list, right? Or do we also get the list of things that were considered and didn't get supported by the sport council?
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, the 14 priority projects that were identified through this process were the projects that emerged through the consultation process with all of the sport users that replied to the survey, as well as through those stakeholder engagement sessions with the facilities task force. Certainly there are still other opportunities for other user groups to be able to provide their feedback into facility needs in the community. However, and I should say, in addition to those 14 projects, there were certainly a number of other items that came forward that were minor improvements or minor maintenance items that are being addressed by staff in cooperation with facilities or park staff and with the sport user groups. Certainly there is opportunity to receive that input.
Thank you very much. And I have one more question for staff on the youth strategy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just don't go too far. There's bound to be more questions. Okay.
So question to staff on the youth strategy, and we heard from the delegation, but when we look at page 409 of our, page 409 of our package and on the youth strategy, Richmond Youth Strategy Advisory Committee included 2 youth members, so presumably they're youth. Chris Lucero, I believe, and Sammy Zhang. How were those people found, or how did they get to be on this advisory committee? What was the process for that?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, there were a number of names put forward by our youth development coordinators and various members of the committee, and those were the 2 who, when the invitation was sent out, both accepted and were willing to commit the time that was required to participate.
Okay, because this was a pretty big document, so I can imagine it was pretty robust strategy sessions that went on with this.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Councillor Heed.
Yes, Mayor, and because we're so short of time, and I've got a couple questions. I'm going to talk about 11, 12, and 17. I think I'd like to ask 17 first, then I want to lump 11 and 12 together because there's going to be some comments with respect to that. So this is on the off-leash dog park. Specifically, I'm going to get right to the point here, is consultation with local residents with respect to the off-leash dog park. What's the time frame for that?
To your worship, to Councillor Heath, currently we are devising a plan to deal with 2 things. One is that public consultation, and second is the site condition. What do we do to manage the dirt concern? The time frame for both is ongoing, but we are looking forward to hosting a public consultation later this summer. So presumably in next next several weeks, we will devise a plan in terms of a list of questions, also addresses that we would send letters out for public consultation. And then after that, we would host a workshop. Knowing that August is usually not a great month for public consultation, we are targeting end of August for a month for public consultation. And then after that, we'll bring comments back to council.
And it's a comprehensive consultation, not just the units that are directly affected that seem to be complaining?
Correct.
Great, thank you. Thanks. Mayor, with respect to 11 and 12, the youth strategy, and certainly this is one that we're going to vote on. So the other one I recognize is just a progress report on the social development. But my question's specific, and then I'll make a general comment with respect to this. Is the risk factors impacting development? I don't know if we have. And this will lead to my comments on what we do collectively as a group. And when we talk about the risk factors here impacting development, poverty and low income, which Ms. Somerville, her and I have talked about the poverty part of it. When we talk about discrimination, when we talk about transition, when we talk about substance use, when we talk about criminal activity, and, you know, the impact of pandemic, you know, acceptance, and when we talk about, you know, sexual orientation, gender identity, being inclusive in all of that, you can imagine that those go across several streams on what needs to be done, and the fact that we have different sections and different organizations within Richmond that are involved in this. Who would take the lead to put this together?
Through the chair to Councillor Heed, there will be an implementation committee struck once the strategy has been endorsed by council to help break out the actions into specific objectives, as well as identify specific timelines for each of those objectives to be implemented. During that process, we will involve the public partners, School District, Vancouver Coastal Health, who work closely with us, as well as other community organizations, including the RCMP, Richmond Library, and all of the youth-serving organizations that we work closely with in Richmond.
Okay, just my comment here, and you know, this is no surprise to several people that are in this room right now, is what I want to ensure does not happen as we start to operate in silos, because, you know, this part around youth is so important here in Richmond because they are our future as we go forward. So the fact that we have, you know, one area we can look at or hold accountable to deal with this, whether it's within our general managers and our staff here. Ultimately, council is responsible at the end of the day for this, but we want to make sure this is a cross-functional responsibility and that there is some accountability in all of that, so we don't get the finger pointed. We as government finger point all the time at senior levels of government, saying it's their responsibility, it's someone else's responsibility, but at the end of the day, it's our responsibility, and we're going to be judged as a council based on that, on an issue that is so important. And, you know, for the examples, when we talk about the poverty issues here, when we talk about the fact that we've got the controversy surrounding one of the modular housing complexes, yet that report, that comes through a different general manager under community safety, but at the same time, it comes under Ms. Somerville's umbrella on how we deal with it. So I just need to be assured that this cross-functional conversation does take place, and I need to be assured that at the end of the day, whether it's a CAO or what, that we can hold accountable to make sure that deliverables we're talking about are actually delivered and what the outcomes were of that.
Through your worship to Councillor Heed, to further Ms. Duggan's comments, the cover of the report reflects numerous departments that are involved in the youth strategy. We've asked for concurrence from those departments. There is ongoing collaboration with multiple departments and communication in terms of addressing the multiple actions within the youth strategy and any of our other strategies. We also come to council every 1 to 2 years, depending on what the strategy or plans action says in terms of coming to council with a progress report. At that time, we also provide that progress report to council that reflects the advancement of the actions for the short-term, medium-term, and long-term actions. And at that point, too, that often reflects who has been involved with those actions to advance those actions. Within the organization, there are multiple different meetings and different committees, as well as committees that are struck outside of the organization with key partners that are involved in advancing the action. So we regularly communicate with those that are involved in advancing these actions for youth. And it is really important that we stay on top of that and continue to look at what the current context is within the community to see if we need to shift any of those priorities.
Do we have the flexibility to shift it around? And the point I'm making here is I understand policy, I understand process, but what's important to me is the outcomes of that. And if we're not getting the outcomes we would like, especially in those areas I identified as risk factors, that we have the flexibility to move that forward, or I can go to, or we can as a council go to one and say, you're accountable to make sure this happens.
Through your worship to Councillor Heed, yes, there is the opportunities to look at how we need to shift priorities as they happen. As the context changes, we look at how we need to shift with our current partners if there's an issue that's happening in the community, and we need to pull a group together to discuss that and to respond to an issue, we will do that.
Thank you.
Was there anything else? Oh, okay, we'll go to Councillor Galanders.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm going to be supporting everything on the consent agenda. I'm just going to speak to a few items. Some of them have been spoken to already. The first is item 7, which is low-rise rental apartment housing on Railway Avenue, which is for seniors, and I know there's a huge need for this. It's great to get to approve rental projects, and thanks to the developer for bringing this forward. Item number 8 is another rental project on city-owned land, which is affordable housing for women and children. And I can't say enough just how happy I am that we're able to do this and approve this tonight. This is going to house 25. It has 25 units, and there's 1,100 people on the waiting list for affordable housing in Richmond. So we need like 40 or 50 more of these just to get through that list. And so it's really going to serve us well into the future and help give people some homes now that are desperately needed. The City of Richmond Youth Strategy, I appreciate Councillor Heed's comments on how we need to ensure that this is efficient and that we're accountable. I just want to give a quote on the conclusion of this youth strategy, and the vision that it hopes to achieve is that all youth in Richmond are safe, valued, respected, and have the supports, opportunities, and resources to live rich and fulfilling lives. And having youth in my life, not just my own children, but all of their friends, I'm passionate about this vision, and I'm looking forward to seeing the difference it might make in all of their lives. And so thank you for that. Item 15 was potential enhancements to the Railway Greenway in response to some areas that are darkened that might be unsafe for using the path late at night. So staff is going to look at potentials for lighting certain areas and done in a thoughtful way that doesn't affect the ecological sensitivity of the Greenway or the people that are living there. There's going to be an extensive consultation done on that. Item 16 is the sports facility needs assessment, which has been long awaited, which has come back, and it includes a lot of exciting items on there. The track and field facility, a covered lacrosse box, which could be used year-round to keep people active and able to use facilities in the rain, and also, as Councillor Liu mentioned, the turf fields for baseball diamonds, potentially at Brighouse or at King George Park will allow baseball to be played earlier in the spring, and when there's goose issues at other fields late into spring, and a number of other things. So this is just a framework of things we can move forward with, and the exact details and locations will come as the reports come in, as they're ready to move forward with each one. And the item 17, as was already mentioned, but there was a strong delegation about a park that could significantly affect the well-being of nearby residents. It could just need to be in a different location, and we were able to hear the concerns of the residents and stop the construction of this right now until we've figured out a solution that everybody can be happy with, so that everybody can enjoy where they live and our parks. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Councillor Al.
Your Worship, I'm supporting everything on the consent agenda, but tonight I want to focus on one item, which is the youth strategy. Thank you to staff for the document, and I think this is a very good guideline for us in the future. However, I think certain things are really alarming and should get our attention. I think generally speaking, we have the idea that Richmond youth is doing well, reasonably healthy, reasonably active, things like that. But if you look at some of the aspects of their life, I think we have some concerns. For example, CNCL 431, talking about the mental health of the youth. And on the top of the page, it mentioned that 19% of youth between age 13 to 19 did not receive the kind of mental health service that they need. So this is 1 in 5. This is a very high number, and I believe that we should, because health is not within our jurisdiction, I think the city should work harder with our community partners to advocate for this young people who need the mental health support. And turning to page 433, the indicators of healthy youth development and well-being. Again, I'm concerned that 18% of the Richmond students in grade 8 felt that they are very high, have a high sense of well-being, which is below the provincial average, which is 25%. So again, I think we should take note of that and see how we can narrow the gap between the Richmond average and the provincial average. But more concerning to me is on page 437, community. As mentioned, young people, they have to feel connected with the family, with the school, and with the community, in order to feel safe and to have a healthy development. But on the top of the page, it mentioned that the survey reported a steady decline in having access to an adult outside of the family who they could turn to for support, from 52% in 2008 to 25% in 2018. So in 10 years, it dropped by half. So this is a trend I think we should be very concerned about. Why are kids not feeling that they are being supported, or they're adults beyond their family they can turn to? Now, fortunately, if you look at the family, a high percentage of kids said that they can appeal to the family for help. But if you look at the community aspect, so they are not getting the support they need, or they can appeal to certain adult outside the family for support. Now, my question to staff is, I know that you have a whole range of action suggestions, but how do we measure success or progress? So with something like that, has been developing a trend negatively. So how are you going to monitor, and how can we make sure that we are changing the trend, we are getting better?
Through your worship to Councillor Au, in the upcoming school year, the BC Adolescent Health Survey will be re-offered to students to complete, and that will give us updated information about how students feel they're doing, as well as the updated middle development instrument data and youth development instrument data. Those are important for us to look at the bigger picture of how youth are doing in the community, and as you've mentioned, compare year over year or multiple years over multiple years. The other component to this is looking very intentionally as a community at the programs and services that we're offering and making sure that they are targeted to the areas of highest need that we see in our youth. And those are pieces that will take place during the implementation plan for the strategy.
Thank you. So I know that we will have formal reports every 2 years, and I hope that we can have more discussion on the trend, or whether the trend is declining or improving in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. On the consent agenda, we have a really varied menu like today. Number 7 is an application for 8520, 8540, 8560 Railway Avenue for senior rental housing. And I did have a question of staff. There are going to be 29 low-end market rental units and 29 full rent units. And what I'm concerned with is this is going to be, and I think it's great that Kiwanis is going to be taking over the management of this, but I did visit the Kiwanis Towers on Gallner this last couple days, and I think what I saw was, it's a beautiful facility, wasn't that built for like affordable housing? Because it did appear as though there was a lot of people there that were well above, affordable income levels. So I was wondering if you could talk about how the people were selected for that, because it's the same group, it's Kiwanis that's going to be running the one on Railway, that's running the one on Gallner, correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, yes, it is the same group. Not sure if Mr.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Day, it is the same group, and the development known as Kiwanis Towers is subject to a housing agreement, which does impose income limits on all of the eligible tenants.
Okay, so I've heard before from staff that every year or so that we review those statistics. I mean, if someone suddenly has come into, a windfall, then they would no longer qualify for those affordable units. Is that not right?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, yes, staff do conduct a statutory declaration periodically. The next upcoming scheduled statutory declaration will likely be taking place in January.
Okay, good, because I actually had a developer of all people call me up and ask me about this and say, we just need a list of people that are pre-qualified, that we know they've supplied, say, 3 years of income tax statements, and they can show that they are in fact, qualifying for affordable housing. And then like item 10 on the agenda is a housing agreement with Westmark Developments, Camo Sun, for 5 lemur units.
So,
So my question is...
Mr. Ursig is going to answer the question.
Oh, perfect.
Through the chair to Councillor Day, we actually do have a referral to take a look at the LEMA program and the housing agreement, and we will be working on that, but we're not in a position to respond in any detail tonight. I'd just like to confirm what staff have advised. Under the existing council-approved housing agreements for existing LEMA units, there is an audit. We call it a statutory declaration process, but it's basically an audit every 2 years. What we have found is virtual full compliance with the housing agreements. The only exceptions in the most recent audit were actually related to the pandemic and the unique circumstances around the pandemic. So you should rest assured that if people's financial circumstances, their income changes, they are required to vacate those units so they can be provided to someone else. And I can't really comment on what's in the parking lot of the Kiwanis on Minaroo.
Yeah, so that I was going to bring up that motion to potentially have a housing authority for the city of Richmond. Will that be likely in place before we write the agreement with Kiwanis for this one on Railway?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, I would expect that the existing housing agreement will be applicable to this development. The question of whether you proceed with a housing authority has not been made. What you have done is given us a referral to explore that. We will do that. We will bring you the options, but it's actually council that would need to make that decision before you can implement anything along those lines.
Good. Well, it's a step in the right direction. And then number 8 is the application for
We'll excuse these
Sorry about that.
staff.
The number 8 is the application for 4831 Steeson Highway, and this is going to be an affordable housing complex for women and children, and they will not have to pay more than 30% of their income to live there, and it'll be permanent housing for them, so it's not temporary. They can make a life there. Well, we received so many letters of support, and what those letters said was basically that Richmond should be a leader. This is the kind of development and perfect location close to transit. The existing bylaw regarding to parking will be fine because most likely they won't be able to afford cars. Hub Cycling said it's an ideal location for walking and cycling. The Richmond Poverty Reduction Coalition expressed support and said that thousands of low-income Richmond residents are receiving vital services from Richmond agencies, and they absolutely applauded this development. and then there's just so many, there was like 40, 50 different people that all had different points, and one of them was a teacher, and she pointed out that she hears all the time that people are living in substandard housing, and this is a welcome addition to the city of Richmond. Now, it still has to go to public hearing, so the public do have another option, another opportunity to speak to it if they have any concerns. Item number, here, 11, the youth strategy. I think it's good that we're moving forward with this, but I am concerned, as Councillor Heed pointed out earlier, that we don't want to be working in silos. We want all our departments to be connected. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that and to know who's going to take the lead and what the outcomes are expected so we can get follow-up information and just make sure we're doing it right. And item number 13 was the supply of hydrovac services. Well, at Public Works, we had a great conversation about this. I said, well, why don't we just buy more hydro trucks instead of farming it out? But they're so expensive to buy and maintain that it's not cost effective. So while we have a few right now that city staff use, this contract is a really well thought out plan, and it does benefit the city in the long run. And number 14 is the provision of traffic control services. And our city staff aren't real thrilled about holding up stop and go signs, but I did want to make sure that the people that are working for these two companies will be living wage employees, and they are. And then we have the off-leash dog park. This is an excellent example. It's item number 17. A group of people from Goldsmith Road came to us and said, this is what our park used to look like, and this is what it looks like now. With no notification, they didn't see the little wee signs that staff had put out. Suddenly, backhoes were tearing up the grass and destroying the park directly behind their homes. So we heard them loud and clear. They made a fantastic presentation. And it was amazing to hear the locals come out and tell us what the issue was. So we put a pause on that project. So I did have a question of staff about, given that all this excavation has been done, and there's gravel and there's drainage and everything else, could we use that area for something else? And the one that comes to mind for me is at Minaroo Park, there is like a, I think they call it a fitness circuit, where you can do chin-ups and jump over bars and do different things to challenge yourself in a fitness circuit. Is it possible to put something like that where we have dug up all that grass and put in all that gravel?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, yes, it is possible. Actually, a fitness circuit is also one of the items identified in the previously council-approved 2015 master plan for the area as well. In the additional public consultation, we asked the question for the broader resident to contribute the idea, and then before we present a recommendation for council's approval.
So after you do the survey and you reach out to the people, not just on Goldsmith, but the entire area, you'll have a better idea whether there's wide range support or not for
Correct.
the off-leash dog area. And maybe at the same time, when you come back, you could tell us options for
No.
what we could.
No, that's not part of the resolution. Consult with nearby residents of the off-leash dog park to review their concerns, explore options to address those concerns. That's what the resolution says.
Well, maybe we'll get a memo then. Okay, that's good. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, and through the chair. Well, I too will be supporting everything on the consent agenda, and I'll just quickly comment on two things that I think are actually unique and very important, and we've heard about them already. But number 7 is the apartment complex senior housing being built on Railway Avenue. 50% lemur, 50% market rental, single owner. I think this is a really good development to have on Stevenson Highway. I was very impressed with the design. If you look at the report, it's quite nice. And also, what was really impressive was the community consultation that took place for this development, because there was no opposition to it, and you might find that a little bit surprising. But that's going to be a really good development and something that would be nice to see more of. The next one I want to talk about is number 8, and that's the Stevenson Highway and Railway development. This is also an excellent development. It's been controversial for some people, but the fact is it's 25 low-rent apartments geared towards women and women with children And that's going to be an excellent addition to the neighborhood. I think there were some concerns expressed by some neighbors, and some of those concerns are legitimate, and I think they can be addressed through the development process. Things like where the garbage collection takes place, or the traffic access in and out, because we all know it is close to Railway and Steveston, the intersection there. So I think those are things that can be worked on. But that fits in with the community plan, it fits in with the city plan, it'll be higher density. And the thing about both of these is, we all talk about it, we all know we're in a housing crisis, an affordability crisis. And the fact is, the people that these two developments are gonna help are some of the people that need help the most. So I think they're both excellent. They're not gonna solve all problems, but they definitely incrementally improve a crisis that we're all in and we all know about. And so I'll be supporting those and everything else on the consent agenda. Thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I'll just follow up, make a few comments. I too will support the Steveston Highway. I think I'd like to take it outside the boxes. I think it's critical we move in this. Not only is this application and particular development important to the people that are living there, we're going to give them a home, and those that have no hope. But I think it's critical that this council and this city is moving in the right direction to provide facilities. A number of years ago, for those of us who were on council, people will remember the Nova House when we took that step and what we had to do to move forward on that. And for those that know where the Nova House is, half of council doesn't know where it is, but that's okay. And it wasn't supposed to know where it is. It is for women. In this case, it's for women and children. And I'm very pleased to see us move that. It shows we care, and it shows that we are moving forward. And in this area, I believe we need to do much more. And we really can't do enough in this area, to be quite frank with you. But there is an opportunity for stability in people's lives and in children's lives, and there will be permanent there. We have good consultation. It's a first-class facility, and we have a good caretaker for that, and to lead along. I do want to make a comment, follow up on the youth strategy, because youth are very dear to my heart, having spent 40 years with youth and more. I think it's important that we look at the strategy we've got here, but I think we got to look at a strategy youth led by youth. I think too often adults lead youth, and youth can lead themselves. Matter of fact, they can do better than we can. And I have no problem with the delegation coming tonight, coming forward. But to me, I think it's very, very important. We already do a lot. And with the referral, I think it's important that we look at those stats. Because the average youth, you would be surprised what they're going to tell you. Because not everybody fills it out. And you don't know how to. And the questions aren't necessarily directed to it. At one time, I remember being in Vancouver and Kerrisdale, where the McCleary report was the Bible about youth. And when you look at the questions, the adults couldn't even answer it. And you look at the feedback. So I think it's very, very important that given the stress on youth today, the fact it is that they are a new generation, they're the only generation that's coming through COVID. Nobody else ever did that. I did. And their lives were turned upside down on that and in an unstable world. So I think the report we have, and I refer staff or council members to page 513. We do a lot in youth. And I think back to the delegation that came tonight, I'm not sure if they're aware of the opportunities to come in. I recall when a number of council members, and you will recall, and the mayor, you led a youth session, Your Worship. We had 8 sessions where we involve youth like our youth out in the delegation. We already have done it, and we have I'm not saying it's the only way to do things, but there are opportunities to have input for the youth. So I think I listed 8 things on page 513 for things that we're already doing, and I think we need to get that out to the community. The other thing tied in with that is the social strategy. I think it's important that we look at the social strategy and we get people in there. with the youth, there's an area in there, youth, and I mentioned 513 in our social strategy, but also in the youth. So they go hand in hand, and I think it's extremely important. So I hope that staff will take that under consideration, because youth do need they need to feel they're connected, they care, they're safe, and we address their issues, because they are going to be and are the rank and file of our community, and they're going to end up taking our spot, so we have to do it right. And that's all I've got for tonight, Your Worship.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Councillor Wolf. Are you satisfied to leave 16 on the agenda?
No, I didn't hear enough from other councillors to sway my thoughts, so I'm going to ask that it be removed.
Okay, so number 16 is now removed from the consent agenda. I'll call the question on all the remaining items in the consent agenda. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? That is carried. So on number 16, Councillor Wolf, you had presumably a referral or something?
Yes, thank you. Your Worship, I will ask that we refer this back. And the reason for that is we've only received 57% participation rate for the sport organizations, which excluded all of the community associations. And so I would like us to actively seek out their, or have their consultant maybe hired back to do that work.
So the referral is to get more consultation. Is it seconded? All right, it's moved and it's seconded. Further discussion just on the referral, not on the merits of the matter, the referral. Go ahead, Councillor Gillanders.
Thank you, Your Worship. The merits of referral, Councillor Wolf brings up a really good point. I did review the memo as well, and I remember that Councillor McNulty at the committee meeting asked stuff. I wonder what the Richmond Sports Council had to say about this. I believe it was the Richmond Sports Council. And then when I saw the memo, I saw that Richmond Sports Council didn't submit a response. So if we want to know what everyone said, then don't we need to know what they all said? I don't know if it's going to change the outcome of the report, but it would be nice to have some more input. If all of these community associations didn't respond, I just want to make sure that they were actually asked, or why didn't they respond? I don't think it wouldn't set us back, to get some more responses from them, and we can still have some of these projects come forward, and by the time we're doing our capital budget.
All right, I'm going to ask staff to come forward. On those 2 points, could you please give us more information?
Yes, through your worship. First, to speak to the involvement of Sports Council, the survey was certainly sent to both the chair and the co-chair of Sports Council at the time, though both the chair and co-chair were also involved on the facilities task force. That facilities task force included members of the Richmond Sports Council, Richmond Sport Hosting, Richmond School District, as well as staff. The participants from Richmond Sports Council on the task force felt that their involvement through the task force, which was to review the results of the survey, to help identify priorities, and also to help develop the criteria that were then used to assess the priorities that were identified. They were well represented through that process. It's important to note as well that the task force endorsed the priorities that were brought forward, and subsequent to that as well, the Richmond Sports Council chair also provided a letter to city staff endorsing the 14 priority projects that were brought forward. To speak to the community association's input, although a number did not respond, or many did not respond to this, the community associations would also have provided input into our major facilities planning processes, as shown with the developments of the Steveston Community Center, the Capstan Community Center. Both of those facilities will feature 3 new sports gymnasiums that will support sport within the community as well. So certainly there are other opportunities for the community associations to provide input into facility needs in the community.
All right, Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, through the chair. I think I just heard the answer to that. Nobody was excluded. It's just a matter of some people didn't respond for the reasons you just gave. The other thing is, just, and Councillor Galander's just asked this too, I think, the delay is, if we did refer, the delay is not a death knell to any process. Is that right?
Through your worship to Councillor Hobbs, staff worked to bring forward the report as quickly as it could to try and align with capital planning processes. So certainly should council endorse the priorities, we would move forward with top priorities in our capital planning processes right away.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Heed.
Yeah, I'm just going to talk in opposition to this motion. That's the amendment or motion that's put forward, is the fact that they had an opportunity to respond. They didn't respond. It's time to get on with doing business. I don't want to see this delayed whatsoever. You've provided satisfactory answers in relation to some of the other people that had an opportunity to respond. I'm a liaison on one of the community associations, and if they don't respond, they don't respond. We can't go knocking on their door after the timeline, so I'm going to be opposed to this.
Well, you mentioned that Sports Council itself hasn't responded, but in fact, the constituent groups in Sports Council have responded. Plus, there's a task force, and the overall group was part of that. Just a minute. Yeah, there you go.
Through your worship, I just wanted to respond to that. In fact, two of the people who sat on the facility task force actually responded on behalf of their organization separately to the survey, so they were part of both processes. They answered the survey and they sat at the task force. So,
oh, maybe it's stacked. I don't know. Okay, Councillor McNulty.
Yeah.
On the referral.
I'm going to move support referral. And the reason I'm going to support referral is I think we need to, we're talking about the future here. Most people don't realize how Sports Council, having been a founder of Sports Council since we started back in 1971 and tried to get facilities, we're talking about the future. The motion on the floor was for consideration. It wasn't endorsement, it was endorsement for consideration. Each project would come forward. But my big problem with what I've seen here, and I didn't see, is location, is participation rates, and there's nothing for East Richmond. To come and say, well, we have 3 gyms in Steveston is going to satisfy the whole community. Well, I can't get to Steveston. I'm a single mom. I can't even get to the soccer pitch. I have to apply for the recreation subsidy, etc. This is a bigger picture than what we're talking about here, and I think we should do it right. And if it's a delay for a week or two, and I agree with Councillor Wilfer and others, there's some interesting things here. I don't know if you studied it. We're going to spend $6 million in one group, 2 projects. We're going to spend another $4 million in another group. The field house, multi-sport field house is in there, but I question what the Sport Council representatives were thinking when that came forward, because that's been on the books since day one. And, so I have to question what they put forward. They're my sport colleagues out there, but I still have to look at. So I think another look at this and bringing in other groups. I was appalled, to be quite frank with you, when I saw some of these groups not responding. When they come forward and say, well, we need this, where were you when we were at the table to get it for you? They're not responding. I can't really, and I thank staff for the memo, and that's why I'm going to support referral back to look at it and say to some of these people as well, what are you people thinking about? We're planning on going on $100 million trip, and you don't want to be part of it. So I from that point of view, Your Worship, I'm not going to be delivered, but I think we have to justify each of these projects as well. You know, I
On the
question.
merits of referral.
But that's why I'm supporting referral. I think we have to justify some of them. And I think we're looking at all 14. We're not looking just at 6. Okay? And my other question on referral is to staff, and I got the comment at the last meeting, that the list that Sports Council has been putting in for the last 30 years will be dealt with as they come along. Well, it's not being dealt with. We need to have funds to deal with, and council members need to support it so we can get on with these projects.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Worship. I won't be supporting putting this to referral. I think we do need to move on. We also did hear from the sports groups, and I think the Sports Council itself wrote us a letter, they endorse it, and my understanding is many of the people on Sport Council, they're representing their group. So for them to vote twice and go through the process twice means that they're double dipping and it becomes unfair. So I think they recognized that they should only answer the survey once and be involved in the process through their sport, and then endorse what came out from the sports as an organization so that they're not sort of effectively double dipping. I can see why the community centers wouldn't have participated in this, because they would have said, we're doing programs, we're not actually doing sports. The Aquatics Advisory Board might not have answered, but the actual groups under them that are performing the sports and are dealing with the sports, like the Kigus and the Richmond Rapids, they did respond. So the actual sports that are looking to get more facilities for their players, for their participants, actually answered. The community centers aren't where people are doing the sports specifically. They're getting side training, they're doing other things. That's what's happening at the community center. The actual sport participation competition is happening in sport-specific and competition-specific spaces. So that's why they're separated, and I can see that that's why the community centers didn't necessarily get involved. I can also see that the karate club didn't get involved because they're pretty much solid in their space and they're not looking for more space. So they kept quiet and left it alone.
Councillor Day, on the merits of referral.
Yeah, I just had one question of staff. If we refer this back, is this in any way going to delay? We've got 6 projects that were on the priority list. The Stevenson London Field Softball Diamond, the synthetic turf sports field, the covered lacrosse box, the synthetic netted turf infield, athletics track and field facility, and the outdoor pickleball courts. Will referring this back just to give these groups one more opportunity to respond in any way going to delay those 6 projects?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, the number 1 priority project on that list, pickleball courts, with council's endorsement, would have been moving forward with a capital submission for 2024. Staff will certainly move as quickly as can, if directed from staff, to seek further consultation, though the timing of that consultation may impact that request.
The 1 out of the 6.
The other items would be brought forward to parks and facility capital planning processes, and each would then come forward in the next 1 to 10 years at the appropriate time for each of those facilities.
So really looking at a big delay then. It's just a matter of 1 project of the 6. Of course, we're not considering the other, well, what is it, 8 more. Not considering those at this time anyhow.
Through your worship, to Councillor Day, that's correct.
Okay, well, I'll vote for the referral because I always believe in consultation. And if we can read, what did we get today? 709 pages. Surely a community organization can do a survey.
I want to go to our CAO and ask to clarify what the process is, because some of the councillors have talked about this like, this is the priority list, and, expect to see these in the immediate future. My understanding was that it was far more loose than that we need to know what the priorities are, but there is a larger capital process that has to be undertaken.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that's correct. And because these projects fit in different kinds of categories and use different types of funding sources, they may come through different processes. Some match up with major facilities. Some are sport amenities that may be funded through other funding sources that can come through. But to Mr. Miller's point, they would all ultimately come through a capital process. And we would be bringing them either to facilities process and then to the capital budget, or directly through the capital budget if they have a dedicated funding source available to them. So the purpose of this report is to understand and get confirmation on council's priorities so we can start to move forward on working on each of them, whichever process it might take.
Okay, with that, I'm going to call the question on referral. All those in favor of referral? Those opposed? That is carried with Councillors Glanders, Lou, Heed, and the mayor opposed. All right, so that's referred out. Now for the item that has been taken off the consent agenda. Wasn't on the consent agenda because of opposition, which is the electric vehicle charging infrastructure requirements for new non-residential buildings. And the General Purposes Committee recommends that the zoning bylaw to amend whatever be introduced and given first reading, and that an owner be permitted to submit a building permit application in compliance with prior requirements if certain things are accomplished. And so I won't read it all out. I'll just move it in the form that is in the agenda. What this is, very simply, is the suggestion that for non-residential buildings, we need far more EV chargers. And the bylaw would necessitate the technical side of the chargers to be complied with in most cases. You wouldn't have the builders actually installing the EV charging units, but the works, the electric works, which would support those chargers in due course, would be in place. And as I understand it, only with shared vehicle parking spaces would those EV chargers actually be installed. I'm fully in support of this, and I'll let others comment. Councillor Day. Councillor Day, if you're not too busy.
Hi, yeah, so why wouldn't you rough in the wiring for electric chargers? It makes perfect sense. We're not saying they have to buy a big expensive unit, but let's just rough in the wiring so that the breaker box is big enough and all the wires are hidden inside the walls. We're doing it in homes. I think we should do it in businesses. It's the wave of the future. I probably will never buy an electric car. Maybe I'll buy a hybrid one day, but I know lots of people do buy them. I mean, I think Richmond is the Tesla capital of Canada. So let's do this.
Councillor Heed.
Yes, I was opposed to this in committee, but I just want to clarify the fact that all we're discussing at this point, and this refers to it just as Councillor Day outlined, roughing it in.
Let's have staff confirm that. I'm sure the answer is yes, but.
Through your worship to Councillor Heed, yes, this zoning bylaw amendment references what's called a EV charging infrastructure requirement. So that infrastructure is the wiring, the adequate panel capacity for the building, and basically a junction box at the parking stalls that fall under the requirement. So this is the same infrastructure situation that we set up for the successful residential EV charging requirement that was passed by council in 2018 and became the first in Canada that way. Similar approach to the non-residential sector. We've chosen a smaller percentage of stalls overall, but basically it's the same requirement except applied to those use types.
And response from the industry with respect to this, I'm assuming this is for new complexes only or refurbished complexes. What is the response generally is all I'm asking for from the industry.
Yeah, staff, through your worship to Councillor Heed, staff went out with consultation to two sectors that are principally basically designing and constructing non-residential buildings. So a segment of Urban Development Institute associated developers, oftentimes in mixed-use projects and things like that, and an organization that's representative of developers and property managers that undertake industrial developments, sort of office and commercial kind of combinations of development, as well as, I guess it'd be strip mall developments and things like that. So those two sectors, this requirement would fall at the design stage, at the development permit stage. We had no pushback on anything to do with cost at that stage. What they were concerned about was that the city was going to apply a one-size-fits-all. So what we did when we approached the development community on the requirements, we also had kind of a door number 2 requirement where certain uses can choose a mix of charging levels and configurations that would better suit their development. So once they understood that, there was a lot of support for what we were bringing forward.
Thank you.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you. Through you to staff, a couple questions. We didn't ask the Chamber of Commerce their thoughts on this, did we?
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, sorry, I missed the question.
You did consultation, but not with the Chamber of Commerce. So the end
Not
user,
directly.
So the final end user would be the people running the businesses in those locations.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, the requirement falls on the developer of these, basically of these projects. So the requirements kick in at the development stage, at the planning stage. And so when we did consult, we were consulting directly with those involved in that.
Okay.
So we weren't engaging with the ultimate tenants in a lot of the commercial retail units and things like that, because oftentimes that comes later once the project is finished. So at the design stage and the permit stage, when the plan drawings are made and the configuration of the development is done and the parking requirements are set, that's when they would understand how they would configure the EV charging infrastructure requirement on the stalls that are in, whether it's visitor or a combination of workforce and visitor stalls.
Okay, but the devil's in the details, because at the end of the day, when, you know, some guy opens his convenience store and then we decide that he needs 1.5 charging stations per, you know, X number of square feet for his convenience store, that's when the devil in the details comes in, right? So then now he's gonna have to put those in or not, or because the developer didn't put in enough charging in the first place, he can't go into that building because all the charging stations are used up. And so it can only be, say, a takeout business that it's not going to be people needing to park for very long. And so, you know, can't have longer stay businesses.
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, thank you for that question and understand it a bit better. At the design stage, the requirements are set and the configuration is set up, but the actual apportionment of those, of say if it's workforce or visitor stalls, would be set after the building is probably fully leased out, and basically would be set up at that point.
Okay, so, and I like the idea of, you know, putting the infrastructure in the first place and looking forward and that we're going to use it. But it seems to me that we did something similar to residential homes. We made a lot of them start building to be set for solar, for hot water. And so a lot of them have all this weird pipe preparation involved. So we added to the cost of all these places. Does anybody know anybody that actually has any solar hot water that doesn't have a swimming pool in their backyard? Like, it's pretty rare, right? So I'm wondering if this is essentially us making everyone put in an extra phone line for their fax machine. In 10 years, we'll have a whole new thing. Aren't we great? We did this, but we created a ton of bureaucracy in the middle. We didn't actually get what we're hoping for, and like, we're not any further ahead.
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, just referring back to the requirement that Richmond brought in 2018 for our residential buildings, that all non-visitor parking stalls and residential developments be equipped with the infrastructure for future charging. And the idea at the time, which still holds true today, is that low per stall cost makes so much sense at the time of construction to do that. So basically that future-proofs the building for the kind of EV transition that we're currently in, and it's accelerating. So the similar logic holds with the non-residential buildings. But what we were trying to target in that was the understanding that in existing multi-unit residential buildings, that may be a decade or more transition to equip those buildings with charging at home, where it's the most convenient to charge if you have an EV. So the only other option for a lot of residents, especially in those types of existing buildings, is to look for opportunity charging and hopefully more visitor charging in commercial establishments, retail establishments, but also if they work in Richmond, perhaps in a new building in an enterprise, they'll have the opportunity to charge at work as well. So those are the kind of decisions you make when you're looking at an electric vehicle, because maybe you have to drive to get to your work, that you'll make that decision to go to away from an internal combustion engine to an electric vehicle in your next decision.
Okay, and do we have a mechanism current yet that allows the operator, the business owner, the employer, to charge for the charging of the vehicle?
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, that's correct. There is basically the way, both in residential and in the non-residential space, we're assuming that depending on the use, there could be a direct current on level, or direct circuit if it's a faster charge that's
Sorry,
required.
I meant, can they financially charge the person plugging in? Can they, like, make their employees have a swipe card or whatever, pay for their own gas, if you will?
Through your worship to Councillor, yes, it is correct. There is load management and account billing software that's built into these systems now. So if you get a smart charging system, which most of these would be, once the infrastructure has been equipped with a charger, you would have that capability to do that. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thanks, and through the chair, well, I supported this at committee and I'll be supporting it again, and I just want to make a quick comment. I don't have a question, I don't think, because they're rhetorical. I think Richmond's policy is quite advanced, and other cities are actually coming to us for some advice on how they can move forward. I think this is just the way it's going to be in the future. And actually, correct me if I am wrong, I've talked to a couple of developers and I've asked them about this, and what I've been told in a nutshell is this is what the marketplace is going to demand of new developments, and so they are more than happy to meet the needs of their customers. Is that a fair assessment?
Through your worship to Councillor Hobbs, I think that observation is fair. This is what we see in the future, and for once a development's in, it's in there for decades. So the way the transition is working in terms of certainly BC, Quebec and Ontario, each of those provinces have a Zero Emission Vehicle Act that requires certain quotas in terms of sales. So we're seeing it accelerating in those provinces already, and in BC is kind of out in the lead. And in the lower mainland, we even have higher demand for that. So looking forward to the future, I think it better equips those buildings to be competitive in the marketplace and offer those services not only to visitors, but maybe their workforce.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Glanders.
Thank you, Your Worship. I supported this at committee. I just had one question, just sort of a runoff of what Councillor Liu was talking about. I just want to make sure I understand, one of the points that Councillor Liu was talking about. If the infrastructure goes into the building, let's say it's a commercial development, based on estimated types of businesses that are going to be there, so a certain number of chargers per spot, and then businesses occupy those, and let's say one of them is a dry cleaner, and they only have one spot for 3 because they are more of a drop-off or something like that. And then down the road, that's for lease, and a restaurant wants to open up in that spot, but they don't have as many spots as would have been perceived needed for a restaurant. But that's not going to affect them being able to open a restaurant there, because it's just the whole place is grandfathered, the whole development is grandfathered in with the number of spots.
through your worship to Councillor Gillanders, if they knew all the, if the developer knew all the future tenants in there, they may predict what the apportionment would be. But generally, they may have it set up so it's more of a generalized service for the parking area that's required. So it's kind of first come, first served. This requirement affects 45% of stalls in general, under the general requirement, but under the choose your own pathway, the alternate compliance pathway, the developer or the project lead can understand, if they understand what the future looks like for their leased out spaces, they could customize that. And in many retail situations, they'll probably choose, which would include restaurants, they would probably choose to go with generalized parking with a certain amount serviced with EV infrastructure, and as well as chargers at some point. And they may even choose to go with DC fast charging to have a higher turnover if it's visitor-oriented parking.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a range of options that's decided there.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Howe.
Yes, motion, I'm going to support the motion. I think this is a logical step, next step of what we accomplish after the residential buildings. And as staff has explained it in the report, this is a trend that we have to follow, or we have to take on. And if we don't do it now, we have to do it in the future anyway. So I think this is the time for us to do this project. So I'm supporting this.
Yeah, from my point of view, it's very simple. This is the trend, and we can have the builders put the infrastructure in for a fraction of the cost that it'll take to retrofit it. It's just that simple. As a user of these services myself, because I have a plug-in hybrid, I can tell you what the real problem is, frankly. It's charging units that don't work. I can't tell you how many times I've gone and tried to use the charging units. They're not operational. I wish we had a bylaw that would mandate that they have to keep them operational, not just install the infrastructure in some of the units, et cetera. But in terms of whether this is the right direction, well, we're talking about the car industry having, within a few years, it's going to be 25% of their sales is going to be electric. Tell me we don't need it. So I will call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Brings us to the last item of business, a UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund grant application. Recommendation is that staff be authorized to submit an application to the UBCM Municipal Community Emergency Preparedness Fund for up to $30,000. As described in the report, should the funding be successful, the fire chief be authorized to execute the agreement, and the consolidated 5-year financial plan would be amended accordingly, just as set out in the agenda.
So moved.
Okay. I'm going to ask a staff member just to give us a very quick capsule comment on what this entails. So we'll ask Brendan McLaughlin to come down and just give us a very quick summary of this.
Your Worship, this is from the, as stated in the UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund grant. So it's going to be going towards initiatives to try and target and identify areas of the city that are susceptible to extreme temperatures. One of the main initiatives we're looking to do is develop a map within the city that identifies sort of targeted hotspots, which can be impacted from aspects such as just developments in the area, the color of the roofs, green spaces, prevailing winds, whatnot. That will allow us, with our extreme, particularly within the extreme heat plan, to know where the sort of vulnerable areas are within the city so that we can have more deliberate responses and initiatives to address that.
All right, we're going to call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you.
Your Worship.
Now we have some public announcements. Just got a few of them. Coming out of closed council, On road naming, Ketchison Road was selected for the extension of the north-south road that will connect Capstan Way to Canby. The name Brown Road was selected for the extension of the east-west road that connects Sexsmith to the new extension of Ketchison Road. And finally, Ketchison Court was selected for the proposed new cul-de-sac road located to the southeast of Ketchison Road extension. Then in more general terms, we have the Richmond Heritage Awards for this year. We're pleased to announce the winners. They're organized by the Richmond Heritage Commission annually to recognize people or organizations for the dedication to the conservation of a historic place or promotion of heritage in Richmond. 5 recipients: the Museum Society for its new museum website. Secondly, Andrea Philpotts and Haley Valaket for customizing course content at McMass Secondary School to teach about the injustice of Japanese-Canadian internment and its impact on Richmond. Thirdly, the Blue Cabin and Deborah Sparrow for programs highlighting the importance of Indigenous cultural heritage practices here. Fourthly, WS Immigrant and Multicultural Services Society for the Canada Multicultural Creative Festival. And finally, Kevin Takahide Lee for using theater arts to educate the community about the forced internment and dispossession of Japanese families during World War II. So we offer our congratulations to these winners. More information about them and the 2023 Heritage Awards can be found on the city website. Then we're approaching Pride Week, July 31st to August 6th. There's a variety of free events and programs that include story times, workshops, fitness classes, and performance that will take place across Richmond in that week. Also, for the first time, a Pride flag will be displayed at City Hall during Pride Week. And we encourage all residents, community members, and visitors to enjoy Pride Week and the many celebration events. If you want details of that, they are on the city's website. Then we have the Steveston Maritime Festival, always a very, very popular event. The 20th annual Richmond Maritime Festival returns to the Britannia Shipyards in Steveston, August 26th, August 27th. There will be an array of free performances and activities that will take place, all with a nautical theme to celebrate our rich maritime history. A number of historic wooden boats and other vessels will be on display, along with food trucks, workshops, and exhibits. And for information, go to richmondmaritimefestival.ca. Now, this is our last council meeting until September. Our next council meeting is scheduled for Monday, September 11th at 7 o'clock here in City Council Chambers. On behalf of council and the city, we wish everybody a safe, happy, and healthy summer. So right after Labor Day, we get back into the committees. We have a public hearing right away. We have General Purposes Committee and other committees will be meeting in that very first week. But I emphasize that the first council meeting is September 11th. Okay, Madam Clerk, bylaws for adoption.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 11 bylaws for final adoption. The first 5 and number 7 and 11 have no noted opposition and can be dealt with as one motion.
Move the 7 bylaws that have no opposition.
Moved and seconded. Discussion, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried.
Bylaw 10436.
Okay, that's moved. Is it seconded? Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Richard. I won't be supporting this, and I didn't support it at council. We recently moved to a 1% bylaw assist, which means that, for example, if we're doing a new upgraded crosswalk, 99% of it gets paid for by new development. We recently, staff just heard from Jean-Francois Perrault from Scotiabank, the top economist from Scotiabank, and he agreed that this is overly onerous on people trying to enter the housing market. It artificially lowers property taxes. It unfairly places the burden for infrastructure upgrades and expansions on newcomers through our growth pays for growth policy. It's something we do. It's something Metro Vancouver does. It raises the cost of property values in general. And to quote him, he said, "I hope we're better than that." it sounds good, it's politically nice, but in truth, we're not actually paying for what we're using, and we're not paying for the upgrades that we're using, so I'm not going to support this.
Councillor Day.
I think if you asked any taxpayer if they'd like to help pay for the sidewalk that's in front of a new development, they'd say, not me, because it's not my sidewalk. While we pay our share of general, like arterial roads and all that, when a new development comes in, everything gets ripped out, sidewalks, utilities, and they have to upgrade everything. And that should be borne by the developer. So I will support this.
I'm going to support this because, well, for many reasons, one of which is that we make a calculation. Staff and consultants actually calculate what the future costs are going to be, and so they have to be covered. So if we don't have the DCCs, then the existing taxpayers are going to be paying for it, and in the words of whatever that guy was, I don't think that's right. So I'm going to support this. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried with Councillor Liu opposed. Now, municipal ticket information on the bylaw 10, 481, 482, 483, and, on those three. May I have a motion? Moved and seconded. Okay, I think that's the alcohol in the parks. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just looking at these three in our package here, I have a question if staff could answer in regards to the fines. It seems a bit confusing. There's 4 different amounts of fines. If you could just lay out what the fines would be for. So there's $250 early pay, $500 late pay, and there's a $950 fine and a $50,000 fine. What's the difference between these? I know the difference between the first two, they're pay on time or pay late.
Through the mayor to Councillor Wolf, it is my understanding that it's a graduated fine system, and then with respect to the fine in the value of $50,000, that is the very big stick, should it go that far, if you will.
That would be in egregious circumstances.
That's correct.
Okay, okay. We're going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried with Councillors Galanders, Wolf, Au, and McNulty opposed. Then on bylaw, no, that's it. No, that's all. Development Permit Panel, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are 2 recommendations for council. Recommendation 1, that the chair's report for the Development Permit Panel meetings held on May 27, 2020 be received for information. And recommendation 2, that the recommendations of the panel to authorize the issuance of development permit number 19866690 for the property located at 5491 number 2 Road be endorsed and the permit so issued.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. So now may I have a motion to resolve in the committee of the whole tier delegations on items which are not on the agenda? So moved. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Okay, we've got one such non-agenda delegation. Jerome Dickey, if you want to come forward to talk about Bark Park safety improvements. And I think, sir, you've been through this before, but if you could introduce yourself, and you've got 5 minutes.
Sure, I'll try and be quick because I'm the only thing standing between you and your summer break, so. Jerome Dickey, 299280 Glen Ellen Drive. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for providing this opportunity to speak to you this evening. First of all, I want to thank those who volunteered to help with this initiative. Your help is very much appreciated, and those people know who they are. Last fall, when Bark Park was reopened and the dedication naming took place, a number of people talked to me about the past safety incidents. Me and my wife, Diana, visit Bark Park regularly with our dog, Poco, so I've got to know many regulars. I didn't think the safety incidents were a large enough issue at that time to warrant any specific action, but have now been convinced otherwise. As the weather warmed up and more people started enjoying the outdoors, I heard more and more users of the park speak about more incidents of people, dog, bike interactions. In fact, I heard a few people have stopped visiting Bark Park altogether. That's really sad, due to the lack of safety of users and their dogs. I knew it was time to do something differently, and hence this petition was begun, which I've sent you a copy of of what the wording is on that. So why am I raising this now? Well, my understanding is that others have raised this issue in the past to no avail. Some city staff are aware of these issues since at least last summer, and there's been no indication of any changes taking place. Our city reporting statistics identifying this problem. If not, why not? And if so, why has no action been taken? Ethically, I cannot stand by and watch people get hurt. In fact, I've seen that right in front of me, as I explained in my letter, and do nothing to change this. It's not right to hear of these incidents, witness incidents myself, be told by residents they have stopped enjoying use of this park, and be okay with allowing the status quo to continue. The city would never approve a pedestrian walkway down the middle of any road with vehicles on it in Richmond, so why would we allow a pedestrian walkway down the middle of a path used by bikes, e-bikes, and other such vehicles? Similar situations and worse have happened at Bark Park, hence why I'm here today to present a request to the City Council on behalf of the residents of Richmond. The final petition will be presented to the Parks Committee on September 26th, but I want to ensure you and the city were aware in advance to proactively consider the options proposed to address this situation. And I've currently got upwards of 270 people who have signed a petition, which I will, like I say, present in September. I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Okay, again, on this one, I think that we should have a motion of referral to staff to look at the safety issues for the users of the Bark Park and report back through committee. So moved. Moved and seconded. Councillor Day.
So, if I understand, I have actually ridden my bike through that dog park and kind of thought the same thing, like, what if some dog charges me, or what if a little dog comes in front of me and I run it over? It'd be tragic.
Yeah.
So, I'm worried about people getting hurt. Do you think if it's like a segregated, fenced or whatever bike path, maybe on the north side of the park, that could work?
Yeah, that's what I propose as the first option, is a segregated path. It could be similar to a gravel path there along the fence line with a small barrier of some type. It could be hedges, it could be something other where the city determines that would segregate that path from the rest of the park, which would help enhance it for bikers too, because then they don't have to worry, as you said, about dogs right in front of them. Yeah. That's what I've seen happen. So it's really better off for everybody.
So really what the park is, it's a victim of success, because so many people want to go there, whether they're biking or whether they're walking their dogs, and that's starting to collide and become an issue, and as particularly a safety issue.
Yeah, for sure. It's a wonderful park, and appreciate it being redone and stuff things, but again, I'm not sure where the upfront consultation was around some of these things, because I've heard from many people this is an issue, and that's a common question with people. Well, why weren't we consulted sort of upfront with this? So yeah, I'll leave that with you to think about.
It seems to be a theme tonight. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. We're going to call the question on the referral then. All those in favor? Councillor Glanders, yes?
Thank you. If we refer this, are we gonna have to wait until Parks in September to find out the solution?
No, staff will get to work on it.
They can just
right
get to
away.
work on it? Okay, thanks.
All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Enjoy your summer break.
May I have a motion to rise and report? So moved. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Someone move adjournment. Thank you.